On the night of our second anniversary, I thought I was living a dream. But one deliberate accident, a glass of red wine spilled across my dress, turned that dream into my deepest humiliation. His sister smirked, the room went silent, and for a split second, I wondered if my marriage was about to crumble under the weight of her cruelty. But what happened next, no one expected. My billionaire husband didn't just offend me. He turned the entire table upside down and delivered a kind of revenge that silenced his whole family. So here's my question for you. If you were in my shoes, humiliated in front of everyone you tried so hard to impress, would you have walked away, or stayed to see how it ended? And before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know. 2 years. That's all it had been. Yet Elena Parker could still remember the exact weight of her wedding gown, the trembling in her hands as she slid the ring onto Michael Harrington's finger. 2 years since she married into a world she never imagined for herself, a world of glittering chandeliers, rooms filled with crystal glassware, and names that carried influence like invisible crowns. And tonight, as she stood before the grand oak-framed mirror in their penthouse suite, Elena told herself over and over, "This is where I belong. I've earned this moment." The Harrington family had agreed to host their second anniversary dinner in Michael's honor, a private celebration inside the ancestral estate, an imposing Georgian manor that looked as though it had leapt straight out of history. Its stone facade whispered of centuries of power, privilege, and legacy. Elena smoothed her gown, a deep emerald silk that hugged her gracefully, chosen not to flaunt wealth but to honor the dignity she had fought so hard to preserve. Her heart fluttered with excitement and nerves. Tonight was not just about an anniversary. It was about proving, quietly but undeniably, that she belonged in this family. That she was no longer the outsider whispered about in drawing rooms. That she wasn't the girl from nowhere who married the Harrington heir. Michael, adjusting his cufflinks nearby, noticed her stillness. "You look like you're about to face a boardroom, not a dinner table," he teased softly. His voice carried that steady warmth that could disarm her even on her hardest days. Elena smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. "It's just, your family. I want everything to go right tonight." He stepped closer, resting a reassuring hand on hers. "You are everything that's right, Elena. Don't forget that." And yet, when they arrived at the Harrington estate, Elena's breath caught, not from awe, but from the way Charlotte Harrington's eyes lingered on her. Cold, calculated, masked beneath a smile. Charlotte, Michael's older sister, was elegance personified. A slim black dress, pearls draped carelessly at her throat, and a glass of champagne poised between perfectly manicured fingers. She moved to greet them, her lips curving upward but her gaze narrowing, dissecting Elena the way one might assess an uninvited guest. "Elena," Charlotte said smoothly, air-kissing her cheek. "That dress is charming. Very brave of you to wear such a bold color." A sting disguised as a compliment. Elena's throat tightened, but she offered a polite smile, determined not to falter. Michael, oblivious to the sharpness in his sister's tone, only commented on how radiant Elena looked. Dinner was set in the grand dining hall, a room lit by golden chandeliers and lined with portraits of Harrington ancestors. As they all took their seats, Elena felt the weight of those painted eyes on her, as though every ancestor was silently questioning whether she deserved her place at this table. She straightened her shoulders, reminding herself, "I do belong. I've given my love, my loyalty, and my life to this family. No one can take that from me." Yet beneath the silver cutlery and polished wine glasses, a storm was already brewing, one she couldn't yet see. What Elena didn't know was that this night, meant to celebrate love, would instead expose the deepest fault lines in the Harrington family. That before dessert was served, humiliation would stain her gown, and her dignity would hang by a thread. And it would all begin with Charlotte. The clinking of silver against porcelain filled the dining hall, but beneath the polite conversation and soft laughter, Elena could feel the undercurrent of tension curling like smoke. She had learned long ago that wealth came with its own unspoken language, a language Charlotte spoke fluently. Every glance, every pause before a word, every seemingly innocent question was sharpened into a weapon, subtle enough to leave bruises no one else could see. The first strike came as the soup was served. Charlotte lifted her spoon delicately, swirling it before speaking with a tone of feigned curiosity. "So, Elena, I hear you've taken interest in, what was it? Community projects." Her voice dripped with the kind of aristocratic politeness that wasn't really a question but an invitation for mockery. Elena kept her composure. "Yes,
she answered evenly.
I've been working with a literacy program in the city.
It's something close to my heart. Charlotte's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How admirable. Truly.
I suppose it's refreshing for the Harrington name to be associated with simpler endeavors.
The words landed like a slapped master's silk.
The table chuckled lightly, not out of malice but because Charlotte had framed it as harmless banter.
Michael, laughing along, didn't catch the sting.
But Elena felt it.
Still, she smiled. She always smiled. She would not give Charlotte the satisfaction of seeing her flinch.
The second strike came with the main course. Charlotte glanced at Elena's fork, then at her own.
Oh,
darling, she said with mock sweetness, you're holding it like you've never dined in a place like this before. How charming.
Heat rose in Elena's cheeks.
She had practiced endless dinners with Michael, etiquette lessons from books, even quiet hours spent watching videos just to avoid moments like this. And yet, here was Charlotte, peeling away her defenses one layer at a time, trying to make her small again. Elena carefully corrected her grip, masking the tremor in her hand.
She forced herself to breathe.
Dignity, Elena.
Always dignity.
Michael, ever absorbed in polite conversation with his uncle, remained blissfully unaware. He laughed easily, sipped his wine, and tapped her hand beneath the table as if to reassure her that everything was perfect. He didn't see that for Elena, perfection was slipping away with each cutting remark. The third strike came like a whisper laced with poison. So tell me, Charlotte leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it intimate, but loud enough that others could hear. Do you ever feel overwhelmed? All this. She gestured vaguely around the room, to the grandeur, the crystal, the gilded frames.
It must be so different from where you came from.
Sometimes I wonder if it ever feels too much for you.
There it was. The dagger.
The reminder of where Elena came from, the shadow of her modest beginnings wielded like an accusation. Elena swallowed hard, keeping her smile intact though her throat burned.
Different, yes, she said softly. But not too much.
Never too much. Inside, though, her heart was breaking. She had worked tirelessly to prove herself to be more than just a guest at this table. And yet, Charlotte's words dragged her back, stripping away the confidence she had built, reminding her of every whispered doubt, every silent judgment. For a moment, Elena felt alone in the room, despite the glitter and laughter, despite the man she loved sitting at her side. She was alone against Charlotte's relentless undercurrent of scorn. But still, she endured. Little did she know, endurance was not what this night demanded. For soon, the patience she clung to would be shattered in a single moment of public humiliation. The kind of humiliation that no smile could disguise. And when it came, it would change everything. By the time the final course arrived, Elena felt like she had walked a tightrope blindfolded. Every smile had been forced, every laugh carefully measured, every word chosen with the precision of someone who knew a single misstep would give her rival the satisfaction she craved. The candles burned lower, casting flickering shadows across the polished mahogany table. Crystal glasses sparkled under the light, filled with burgundy red wine that caught the glow like liquid fire. Elena thought, for a fleeting moment, that she had survived the evening. That perhaps Charlotte would tire of her quiet composure and retreat into her polished veneer of charm. But Charlotte Harrington was not the type to retreat. She was the type to strike when the room was at its warmest, when guards were down, when laughter flowed easily and no one expected malice. It happened during the toast. Michael had just risen, lifting his glass high, his voice full of warmth and pride. To 2 years with the woman who has brought light into my life. To Elena. Every pair of eyes turned toward her, and Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, not the flush of embarrassment, but of love. Michael's gaze was steady, adoring. For a moment, the world shrank until it was just the two of them, a promise renewed in front of his family, a validation she had longed for. She lifted her own glass, trembling slightly, ready to meet him in the moment. And then, the cold shock hit her before she could process what had happened. A sudden splash, sharp gasps, the sound of crystal skittering across wood. Her emerald silk dress darkened instantly, crimson blooming across it like a wound. The liquid clung, staining, seeping, spreading. Red wine. Everywhere. Elena froze. The room tilted. Conversations faltered, and silence descended like a curtain. Oh my goodness. Charlotte's voice rang out, high and theatrical. Her hand hovered above Elena's lap, the rim of her overturned glass still trembling in her grip.
How clumsy of me.
I didn't see, how awful. The apology was hollow, syrupy, a performance for the audience. Her eyes, though, those cold blue eyes, glittered with something Elena recognized instantly.
Satisfaction.
Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, to demand why, to expose Charlotte's cruelty for what it was. But her body betrayed her. She sat frozen, heart hammering, cheeks burning, shame coursing through her veins hotter than the wine soaking her gown. She heard the faint whispers at the table, sympathy, yes, but laced with the same old doubt.
Poor Elena. Always out of place. How unlucky. How clumsy.
And in that instant, all of Elena's insecurities crashed over her. The endless lessons in etiquette, the careful steps she had taken to erase the traces of her modest beginnings, the silent battles she had fought against judgment and whispers, all undone in one cruel, deliberate act. She rose slowly, her chair scraping against the floor.
Every eye followed her.
Her legs felt heavy, her gown clinging to her like shame itself. She forced a small smile, one last attempt at dignity. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice thin, before walking toward the restroom. Inside, she leaned against the marble sink, staring at her reflection. Her once beautiful dress now bore a dark scar, the silk ruined. Her mascara smudged as tears threatened, though she blinked them back fiercely.
She would not cry.
Not here. Not for Charlotte. But the question haunted her. How much more could she endure? She straightened her spine, wiped her cheeks, and whispered to her reflection, "You are not broken."
Not tonight. Not ever.
When she returned to the dining hall, the room buzzed faintly, but all noise seemed to die as her gaze met Michael's. He was standing now, no longer smiling, his expression carved with something she had rarely seen directed at anyone but his fiercest business rivals. Cold fury. And in that frozen moment, Elena realized the night was not over.
The storm had only begun.
The dining hall felt different when Elena returned. The golden glow of the chandeliers now seemed harsher, the polished wood colder, the air thicker. Her ruined gown clung to her body, every step a reminder of the humiliation she had just endured. Yet when her eyes found Michael's, something in her chest steadied.
He was no longer laughing.
No longer distracted by conversation or charmed by his sister's polished act. His gaze burned with a calm, deliberate fury, the kind that made business rivals crumble and boardrooms fall silent. And now, it was directed squarely at Charlotte. The family, sensing the shift, hushed.
Forks paused mid-A. Glasses hovered untouched.
Michael rose slowly, the legs of his chair scraping the floor with finality.
He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to.
His very presence commanded attention. "Enough," he said, his tone quiet but edged with steel. Charlotte, still clutching her glass like a shield, forced a nervous laugh.
"Michael, darling, it was an accident."
"Surely Elena doesn't." But Michael cut her off, his eyes unwavering.
"Don't insult me, Charlotte. Don't insult her."
The words sliced through the room. Elena, standing near the doorway, felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to Charlotte like that. Not here, not in this house, not at this table. Michael turned slightly, addressing the room, though his gaze never left his sister's.
"For 2 years, I've watched you test her.
I've seen the way you cloak cruelty with smiles, the way you chip away at her dignity with barbed words you pretend are harmless. And I stayed silent, thinking, hoping, you'd eventually choose kindness." He paused, lifting his glass, though his hand was steady, his movements controlled. "But tonight, you crossed a line. Tonight, you humiliated the woman I love.
And I will not allow it."
Gasps rippled around the table. Charlotte's face flushed, her composure fracturing. She tried again, her voice trembling with false sweetness. "Michael, you're overreacting. It was a simple spill." "Do not lie," he interrupted, his tone sharper now.
"You wanted to wound her.
You wanted to remind her of where she came from, of who you think she isn't. But let me remind you," he leaned closer, his words low and deliberate. "Elena Parker has more strength, more grace, and more class in one moment of her silence than you have shown in your entire life." The silence was suffocating. Every Harrington at the table shifted uncomfortably, but none dared speak.
Elena's heart pounded.
A mixture of disbelief and relief surged through her, the sting of humiliation now tempered with something far stronger, vindication.
Michael set his glass down firmly.
This family's legacy means nothing if it's built on cruelty. If Elena is not respected here, then neither am I. And I assure you, Charlotte, you will find life very different without the privileges you so casually abuse.
Charlotte's lips parted, but no words came. Her mask was gone.
For once, she had nothing to shield her. Michael extended his hand toward Elena, his expression softening only when his eyes met hers. "Come sit, my love," he said gently. "The only person I raise a glass to tonight is you."
The room remained silent as Elena walked back to the table.
She placed her trembling hand in his, feeling the strength of his grip, the certainty in his defense.
For the first time all night, she felt truly seen.
And for the first time in her life, Charlotte Harrington had been silenced.
The power had shifted. The air in the dining hall had changed.
Where once there was easy chatter and condescending laughter, now there was only silence, heavy, watchful, charged. Charlotte sat rigid, her face pale, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance she had worn like a second skin. But Elena had never felt taller. As she returned to her seat beside Michael, her ruined gown clinging with each step, she expected to feel only shame. Yet what she felt instead was a wave of something she hadn't dared hope for all evening: relief.
For the first time, she wasn't carrying the burden alone.
Michael's words still echoed in her ears, each one a balm to every wound Charlotte had inflicted. When she sat down, Michael slid his hand over hers. His grip was firm, grounding her, letting her know without words that she was no longer standing at the edge of belonging. She was his equal, his partner, his chosen. The room tried to recover. A cousin cleared his throat, someone reached for their glass, another murmured about dessert. But the Harrington dinner had shifted irrevocably, and every person knew it. Respect, once denied to Elena, now demanded itself in the silence.
Elena didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or glance triumphantly at Charlotte.
No, she lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and carried herself with the quiet grace that Michael had just named aloud. That was her victory, dignity intact, elevated not by shouting, but by silence that spoke louder than any insult. And then came the final strike, delivered not with venom, but with precision. As the meal drew to a strained close, Michael's voice once again cut through the air. "Before we part, I'd like to make an announcement." All eyes turned to him, expectant, uneasy. Charlotte's fingers twitched against her napkin. Michael's tone softened, but it carried the weight of decision. "I've decided that the family trust overseeing our charitable foundation will shift. From tonight onward, Elena will be taking the lead. She has the vision, the compassion, and the integrity to make it meaningful. It is no longer just a fund to preserve the Harrington name, it will become a force to change lives."
Elena's breath caught. She hadn't known. Michael hadn't discussed this with her.
Yet in his eyes, she saw not a grand gesture of pity, but an acknowledgement of her strength. Charlotte's jaw tightened, her face reddening. The trust had been her domain, her shield of importance. Now, it was gone, placed firmly in Elena's hands. Michael leaned back, his hand still resting on Elena's, as though the decision needed no defense. The message was clear. Elena was not only his wife, not only his equal, but now, undeniably, a pillar of the Harrington legacy. The silence stretched, broken only by the clinking of cutlery as the staff brought out dessert.
No one dared challenge him. No one dared question Elena's place again.
She sat quietly, her heart swelling with something deeper than triumph. This wasn't revenge in the way Charlotte might have feared, it was something far greater.
It was validation. It was belonging.
It was dignity restored, not by force, but by love. And as she lifted her fork to her untouched dessert, Elena realized that her victory was not loud or vengeful. Her victory was quiet, steady, and undeniable. The kind of victory that lasts. Later that night, after the last guest had gone and the Harrington estate had fallen silent, Elena stood in front of the wardrobe mirror in their suite. The emerald gown, once her proud choice for the evening, now hung heavy on her body, marred by the dark scar of wine. She reached up, touched the fabric, and let her fingers trace the stain. Hours earlier, this would have broken her. Hours earlier, she would have seen it as proof of everything Charlotte wanted her to believe, that she didn't belong, that no matter how hard she tried, she would always be an outsider in a world that wasn't meant for her. But tonight, the stain was different. It wasn't humiliation anymore. It was a reminder. A mark of survival. Proof that she had walked into fire and emerged with her dignity intact. Proof that cruelty, no matter how carefully disguised, cannot destroy the truth of who someone is. Behind her, Michael entered quietly. He had shed his jacket, his expression softer now, the fury of earlier replaced with a tired tenderness. He came to stand beside her, his reflection tall and steady in the mirror. "Do you hate the dress now?" he asked gently.
Elena shook her head. "No."
"I think I'll keep it forever." Michael smiled faintly, slipping an arm around her waist.
"Good.
Then one day, when you tell our story, you can show them this dress and remind them what strength looks like." She leaned into him, her heart swelling with gratitude. Not just for the defense he had given her, but for the lesson this night had carved into her soul.
Strength isn't loud. Dignity doesn't need to shout.
And revenge, true revenge, isn't always about striking back. Sometimes, it's about standing still, allowing the truth to reveal itself, and letting love silence cruelty more effectively than any retaliation ever could. As she carefully slipped the gown from her shoulders and hung it inside the wardrobe, Elena felt a strange peace. This night would not be remembered as the evening Charlotte humiliated her. No, it would be remembered as the night her husband defended her so completely that humiliation turned into validation, and cruelty was stripped bare for everyone to see. The scar on the silk would remain, yes. But it would remain as a symbol, not of defeat, but of dignity. And as she closed the wardrobe door, Elena whispered softly, more to herself than to Michael, "No one decides where I belong. Not anymore." If you were in Elena's place, would you have spoken up against Charlotte yourself, or waited for the moment when justice revealed itself? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us, dignity always wins.